Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. In this story, we follow one retail worker who's juggling every task under the sun. Reshop, pickups, morning stock, and hundreds of online orders while management keeps piling more on. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. Retail boss pushes too far. This story takes place almost 5 years ago, right as I was getting out of retail and into my career field. My job at that time was to pick, pack, and ship online orders from the store. I usually started my day between 6 and 7 a.m. and left by 3 or 4 p.m. As we got closer to my last days, management started adding new tasks to my daily workload. Keep in mind, this is as the holiday orders are ramping up and we're getting busy. First thing they added, ship from store, now also has to pick and pack in-store pickup and carry-out orders. Next, it was the non-clothing reshop in the mornings that the night team didn't or couldn't or wouldn't finish. Finally, it was adding a set of morning stock batches that I had to pull, push, and backstock by 10 a.m. I gave my employer a whopping 3 weeks' notice to find and have me train a replacement. In that time, I trained a few people, but none of them could do the work as well or as quickly as I could. Understandable. I'd worked there almost 4 years at that point. All of those people I trained were moved to new positions within the week, and I never got more than 1 day with them. That company requires at least 4 hours of training for a new task, not including the computer-based portions. I think altogether I got maybe 2 hours with each person. Anyway, 2 days until I'm officially out, I come in at 6:30 a.m. and grab the reshop for the entire non-clothing portion of the store. I finished that around 7:30 a.m., then I started getting the in-store pickup / carry-out orders that have to be done by 8 a.m. I got those done by 8:15 a.m. Morning pulls done by 10:15 a.m. Then I finally got to start my actual job. I checked the system to see how many SFS orders I have, almost 300 items and counting. It doesn't actually stop adding new ones until 1 p.m. At 10:20 a.m., the store director walks his happy butt on in and immediately asks me why the SFS isn't done yet, so I give him the same rundown that you just read. He was not happy. I don't remember his entire lecture, but I do remember that he covered varied topics such as why my then-girlfriend, now fiancé, may leave me if I don't get my act together, how these orders really aren't that difficult, and he even explained that he kept pulling people away from this position because he knows that I can do the work and he looks forward to my continued service in this role. Hold up, did he forget that I put in my notice? I tried to explain to him that I had started picking for SFS within the last 5 to 10 minutes, but he didn't hear a word of it and simply said in his most sarcastic, passive-aggressive voice, "If you can't handle it today, I understand. Take a few days off and come back refreshed." So I took my last few days off. When they called me the next week while I was training for my new job, I didn't answer. The HR manager at the store finally caught me by calling from his cell phone as I was on lunch. He said they never got my 2 weeks' notice and that I was in serious trouble if I didn't show up for my scheduled shifts. I told him, "Oh, no problem. Let me just add you to the email chain." And I forwarded him the email chain between me and the store director, where I gave him 3 weeks' notice and he acknowledged it. Good day in my book. So glad I'm not in retail anymore. Wait, you told them you were done? You better come back or else. I would have told them I'll be right there, don't have anyone touch anything, then immediately blocked all numbers. What exactly do they think they were going to do? And our second story. Rude Karen at Walmart yells at deaf girl. I was at Walmart looking at the books while I waited for my friend to get off work so I could drive her home. Just typical browsing, looking at the covers and putting them back, etc. There were no other boxes or overstock near me, so it wasn't plausible that I was stocking the shelves. I was also wearing black leggings and a college logo t-shirt, so wasn't even in a uniform. I'll add in what was approximately said when someone else was there to clue me in. Being deaf, I didn't hear anyone saying anything or even walking up behind me. I did, however, feel a finger tapping me on the shoulder. I turned around and looked at the woman with a questioning look on my face. She was talking at me, but I had no idea what she was saying. I try to tell her I'm deaf and I can't hear her by pointing at my ear and shaking my head. She looked at me and reached at my ears. I later found out she thought I had headphones in and was trying to yank them out. This was before true wireless earbuds, no visible wires, so I naturally recoil and back away. This pissed her off. She started yelling. You can tell when someone starts yelling, even if you can't hear them. Apparently, she was yelling, "Don't act like you can't hear me, you little bee. You need to do what I say or you're fired." I still had no idea what was going on, so I started to walk away. She grabbed me by my shoulders roughly and started screaming again, "Don't walk away from me. I'm going to get your manager and get you fired." She then starts yelling for a manager. My friend comes back and signs to me asking what was going on. I shook myself free of the woman and told my friend I didn't know. The woman started yelling that we were now flashing gang signs and were planning to kill her. Yeah, the two obvious middle-upper-class white girls totally in a gang. My friend tries to explain, "My friend is deaf and can't hear you. Please leave us alone." Before the mom could say more, her son walks up and says he's ready to go. His mom starts yelling about how she's not going anywhere until she gets her alcohol out of the locked cabinet. Figures. A manager walks up shortly after and asks what's going on. The mom says that I was rude, ignoring her, and not doing my job. Manager says I don't work there, but he'd be happy to help. She doesn't believe him and wants the store manager. The ASM is on duty, so he gets called out and says the same thing, that I don't work there. The mom rolls her eyes, and my friend and I walk away. All the while, she's yelling at me to get back there and do my job and how it's a conspiracy to make her look stupid. She did that herself just fine by herself. On her way out, we see her being escorted out by police officers in handcuffs. Apparently, she pushed one of the workers. I was asked if I also wanted to press charges for assault, but I didn't care and didn't want her getting locked away for too long since I didn't know if she was a single mother or not, and going into the system sucks, so I didn't want the kid to get overly punished. My friend disagreed with me, but understood my reasoning. Took me months before I was able to go back into a Walmart by myself. By pressing charges, you might actually help the kid to understand the way his mother acts is unacceptable. Also, people this stupid never learn the easy way, so let her go down the hard path. And our last story. My neighbor Rick versus Karen. Rick was a simple, good-natured guy from a small town near Seattle. He had a thick red beard, a protruding belly, and an endless love of beer. He lived with his wife in a single-story house with a small yard and a covered garage where he kept his tools and often tinkered with small projects. Everyone in the neighborhood knew Rick was peace-loving and disliked drama. In stark contrast was a neighbor a few houses down named Karen, known as Karen from the HOA. In the early 2000s, people didn't use social media yet, so gossip spread by word of mouth. They said she was too skinny, had a twitchy eye, a strange smell, and had been divorced 5 times. She disregarded other people's boundaries and believed that HOA rules gave her the right to interfere in anyone's business. She was often seen grumbling at neighbors' kids, scaring other people's cats, or arguing about what she claimed were improperly mowed lawns. Rick tried to ignore her antics. He believed it was better not to tangle with someone always looking for a fight. But one day, something unexpected happened. That morning, Rick went off to help his cousin move furniture. When he left, he didn't lock the garage because he thought his neighborhood was safe. Meanwhile, Karen, enraged by yet another phone argument, saw the open door and, without asking permission, pulled her old Toyota inside. "If there's a problem, let him figure it out later," she muttered to herself. Rick returned late in the afternoon with a case of beer from his grateful cousin. He immediately realized whose car was in his garage. At first, he thought about calling the police, but he didn't feel like dealing with the paperwork, so he just locked the garage from the inside and went home, smiling as he pictured Karen's reaction. Then he got in his own car and headed off to the night shift at the brewery, where he worked packaging and occasionally overseeing the equipment. The next morning, Karen showed up at the garage, pounding her fists on the metal door and shouting, "Open up! You stole my car!" Hearing no response, she grabbed a crowbar and started scraping the paint, trying to break the lock, but the garage was sturdy, so the door held. Though it suffered some considerable damage, Karen grew even angrier. This wasn't her first bizarre stunt. A few weeks earlier, Rick's golden retriever, Milo, had accidentally slipped through a hole in the fence onto Karen's property. Rather than simply shoo the dog away, Karen grabbed a crowbar and chased the poor retriever, swinging the bar and screaming she would break his ribs. Only Milo's quick legs saved him from her blows and got him safely back into Rick's yard. That was when Rick realized it was best to be cautious around Karen. But now the situation was more complicated. Realizing she couldn't handle the locked garage door on her own, Karen called 911. In a strained voice, she claimed her neighbor had stolen her car and was keeping it locked in his garage. The police don't ignore reports of a stolen vehicle, so an officer arrived soon after. They found Karen, face twisted in anger, standing by the damaged garage. Rick still wasn't home at that point. His relief at work wouldn't show up until evening, so he arrived around 7 p.m. and immediately noticed the police cruiser and the agitated officers. Karen ran toward him, yelling that Rick was a thief who had forcibly locked up her car. The officers pulled her aside and asked Rick to explain what happened. "I have everything on camera," he said calmly. "I've got footage of her driving into my garage without my permission and then damaging the door." Luckily, he'd installed a couple of security cameras the previous year after some of his tools went missing. The officers watched the footage and saw the whole truth. "Looks like there's no theft here," one of the officers remarked, looking at Karen. "But we do have unlawful entry and property damage." Hearing this, Karen became even more furious, insisting that the HOA's rules let her do whatever she wanted. The officers began writing a report and explained that she would have to answer for her actions in court. The police do not take kindly to unauthorized seizure of someone else's property. Realizing she was in serious trouble, Karen exploded in anger. "You're all conspiring against me," she screamed, trying to snatch some paperwork out of the officer's hand. "I'm not paying any fine." The cop barely kept his cool, but politely continued to point out that she had broken the law. Then Karen tried to scratch his face with her nails. He managed to jerk away, but still ended up with a scratch on his cheek. That was the last straw. The officer quickly twisted Karen's arms behind her and put on handcuffs, reading her rights. She yelled that she would complain about police brutality, but it did no good. Assaulting an officer is a serious crime. They loaded Karen into the patrol car. Neighbors, peering from their windows, watched the drama unfold in silence. Rick sighed as he surveyed the damaged door. The officers apologized for the trouble, took his statement, and advised him to file a civil suit for property damage. "What a day," Rick said, feeling both tired and relieved. Karen now faced a court hearing and might remain in custody for the time being. For Rick, that meant a few peaceful weeks. Afterward, the neighbors swapped the story among themselves, how Karen decided she could park wherever she wanted and what happened when she lashed out at a police officer. Someone later joked, "Imagine calling the cops on yourself." Most people were just glad that Karen would finally have to face the law. After the police left, Rick stayed in the garage. He ran his hand over the deep scratches, shook his head, and realized he'd have to buy more paint and tools for repairs. Despite all the hassle, he felt a sense of relief. It looked like there would finally be quiet, no more loud outbursts or crowbar threats. That evening, he remembered the case of beer he'd left in the trunk. He went into the house, popped open a bottle, and took a few satisfying gulps, picturing how he'd tell his friends the funny story of Karen from the HOA, who called the cops on her own crime and ended up behind bars. Whatever else happened, life was back on its calm track, at least for a while. Karen, don't meddle where you're not asked. And don't be surprised when the law turns against you. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.